All right, welcome to Sports Wars and Sports Picks NFL Wildcard Weekend. It's going to be a wild one with 3 nights of NFL playoff postseason action here at Sports Wars. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. And this is brought to you by sportspicks.locals.com, where you can get the best value for sports handicapping information. A lot of that's given out for free by a range of board members and a range of content. And you can pay for subscribed picks, which is one of the best values in the entire handicapping world. 2 straight seasons of profitable bets in world football, in college football, in pro football, you name it. We have been profitable at sportspicks.locals.com, where you can be a subscriber to get the best value in handicapping out there. So let's move into Wild Card Weekend. First game up, 4:30 Eastern, 1:30 on the West Coast. Seattle travels to San Francisco. Seattle is almost 10-point underdogs. The line hovering between 9 and 10 points in favor of the San Francisco 49ers. The Seahawks were not expected to be here without Russell Wilson and bringing in Geno Smith. They had one of the longest shots to even make the postseason, yet here they are. But the public is hammering the 49ers, who have owned the Seahawks of late. 2/3 of the tickets are on San Francisco on the line. Almost 95% of the money line bets are on San Francisco as a -500 favorite. Total at 42. The money evenly split between the over and under, with a little bit lean towards the under. Basically, Vegas is predicting a 26-16 score. They don't expect Seattle's defense, which was weak much of the year, to be able to contain San Francisco, and they don't expect Geno Smith to be able to put up some of the yards and stats he has put up this year. Of note, single-digit favorites in the wild card round at home have been, or on the road, have been a net money loser over the past decade. By contrast, double-digit favorites have been a big money maker. Well, the 49ers sit right on the edge of that trend because the line shifts between 9 and 10. If you look at it from a yard per play perspective, San Francisco offensively is only marginally better than Seattle, which might surprise people. San Francisco averages about 5.9 yards per play, which normally translates into about 26 points a game. But Seattle's not far behind at 5.7 yards per play. Now, if you looked at it from a passing game perspective, the net yards per attempt, the edge goes to San Francisco at 7.1 to 6.4. But if you looked at it from a touchdown perspective or a completion perspective, the edge would shift back to Seattle. So this is a very big spread that seems to realize the preseason expectations of these teams, without much respect being given to Geno Smith going on the road in the postseason, and with the 49ers, many bettors favorite to win the Super Bowl. What do you think, Cricket?
Man, I think I got to look to the total in this game. I just don't see a lot of points coming out of this game. Historically, Kyle Shanahan's offense have not been great in the postseason. I mean, in 6 career playoff games as a head coach, his offensive average very modest, 21.7 points per game, and his quarterbacks have totaled 4 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in those games. So they've won most of his playoff games simply off of defense, and that's where they really thrive in that aspect. On the other side, the Seahawks, like you said, the offense was clicking kind of early on. You had Geno Smith doing some good things on offense, but of late, they just not have looked well. And they have been one of the worst teams in the league all year long in the red zone. When it comes to the red zone, they score touchdowns on just 47.3% of their possessions in the red zone. So that's something that could definitely be an Achilles heel for them going into the playoffs, because you want to be able to get touchdowns and get points when you get in that scoring area, and they've just not been able to really manufacture that throughout the year. But I just see too much defense in both these games for both teams. San Francisco has been, what in my opinion, the best defense all year long, number 1 in scoring defense and total defense. So I just don't see a lot of points coming out of this one. And with Brock Purdy at the helm, stuff like that, I think he's going to do enough to get the job done, be efficient with the football, but I don't think they're going to ask too much out of him. And I just don't see a lot of points coming out of this one. So I'm going to go under the 42.5 right here and expect it to be kind of a boring game early on, maybe with some fireworks late, because I don't think anybody's going to really blow the doors off in this one. But I just do not see a lot of offensive fireworks.
Your thoughts, Cody, and any particular player props that might be worth watching?
The rushing totals for Kenneth Walker III. He's done a good job of getting over those almost throughout the latter half of the year. So I look towards that as far as player prop bets, and I'm also going to be looking at some offensive players for San Francisco between Christian McCaffrey and others to see what their totals are on yardage for sure. I think 9.5 is a little high here. I really trust that defense. I really respect it. It's a defense in the modern era that when we're no longer almost paying attention to defenses anymore because everyone's defense is at least average and good. There's no like big, huge, consistent, significant defenses in the year the way there was, with the old Baltimore teams or the old Tampa Bay teams. But I don't trust Brock Purdy that much. Again, they're not going to ask him for a whole lot, and I think they can get the win here, but I think 9.5 is just far too many. Geno's been doing some really things offensively. I think they're going to be able to get down there and get in the end zone at least. I don't think this is going to be like a 14-3 game or anything like that by any means. So I'm looking for Geno to continue to be who's really undervalued, who really people kind of forgot about after his jaw got broken. I don't think people realize the last 4 games he played, he actually played really well in, and then he had that long stretch of practices with no interceptions. They were hyping him up, and then his own player cleans his clock there, gets his jaw broke, and then we never hear from him again until finally he's backing up Russell Wilson out there, and he's just kind of in this forgotten world. But he was already starting to come on before, and we just all kind of forgot about it. So it's been exciting to watch it. I want to watch him, get a playoff win. That'd be fun, and that'd be interesting. But I'm not sure that's going to happen. But I think they're going to keep it close enough to make it a game.
Yeah, I think if you like Seattle, I think there is a possibility of a single team for those sites that allow same team, same game parlays. Seattle in the under might be a combination that makes sense. If the doubt is primarily San Francisco's offense, if the belief is that Geno's going to put up a big number, then that might change your approach. The next game up on Saturday night at 8:15 Eastern, 5 o'clock West Coast time. The interesting thing is the West Coast game is the early game, and the East Coast game is the late game, because this is the Chargers traveling across the country to play the Jacksonville Jaguars, who got a fumble recovery into the end zone to get them into the conference division position to be in the playoffs to begin with. Now, Jacksonville is a home underdog at about 2.5 points, plus 120 or so on the money line. Jacksonville minus 140 on the money line. Total of 47.5. Basically, they're predicting something like a 25-23 Chargers victory. The public is leaning towards the Chargers on both the money line and the spread. And then they really love the over because the Chargers have everybody healthy offensively, and Jacksonville has been on a good run offensively of their own accord. Now, Jacksonville comes into the playoffs off a win. Chargers come into the playoffs off a loss. Certain other historical metrics would favor Jacksonville in this situation. A team coming in off a win, facing a team off a loss, has covered more often than not. Home underdogs have been a pretty good bet in the wild card round in recent years. And if you look at them statistically from a yard per play offensive perspective, Jacksonville's averaging 5.7 yards per play, 6.3 net yards per passing attempt. By contrast, the Chargers were a middle-of-the-pack offense. Now, granted, a lot of injuries, but 5.3 yards per play, about 6.1 net yards per attempt. So you have Jacksonville, the statistically better offense, playing at home as an underdog coming off a win, facing a Chargers team that hasn't been in the playoffs in 2 years or more, which has also been generally a trend bet to make, is you bet against a team that's new to the playoffs, bet on a team that's been there recently. So even though Jacksonville hasn't been there recently either, Jacksonville's at home, and historically it's the road team that's new to the playoffs that has struggled to cover, and the Chargers are a road favorite, which has not been a money ticket casher in recent playoff wildcard routes. So this is a game in which I lean towards Jacksonville. Don't have a strong feel towards the over, the under. Might look at prop bets related to offensive performance of Jacksonville players, because I could see that being a particular place where they excel. But we'll see. What do you think, Cricket?
Yeah, I think the person with the most to lose this weekend is probably the Chargers head coach, Brandon Staley. Sean Payton kind of lurking around out there, and he's been talked about with the Broncos job, but I think the Chargers job is a more more appetizing job for him and somewhere he would like to end up. And Brandon Staley's first season last year, the Chargers went for it on fourth down a crazy 31.5% of the time. It led the league by a pretty significant margin, and they had a fourth down success rate of 64.7%, which was fourth in the league. So they did well in it, but this year they backed way off of that. They've only went for it on fourth down 21.8% of the times with just a fourth down success rate of 51.7%, which is about middle of the pack in the league. And the Jags come in one of the hottest teams in the league after winning 5 straight to get themselves back in playoff contention, 2 wins over the Titans, a win over the Cowboys. Trevor Lawrence has played really, really well. Did not play great in that Week 18 game against the Titans, missed some throws and things like that, but that defense really stepped up when they had to have him. But Trevor Lawrence for the year, his QBR is only 54.7, which is 15th in the league, and he's turned the ball over 17 times. He's lost a league-leading 9 fumbles this season. So it's really going to boil down to whether they can protect the ball or not and not turn it over and give the opponent short fields and things of that nature. They really need to get that ground game going. Travis Etienne's had a decent season, rushing for something like 1,100 yards. He became the primary starter when James Robinson got traded to the Jets. But he's only averaging 57.1 yards per game and only has 1 touchdown since their Week 11 bye. And like I said, last week against the Titans, they had 19 yards on 14 carries. So that's just not going to be able to get it done. You got to be able to have some balance on offense and be able to do that. So, but I really do like the Jaguars right here. I just don't feel as good about the Chargers. I think they made a bonehead move playing Mike Williams and all those starters in the game that ultimately did not matter. They played them the whole game because it said something about momentum, but I don't think they got any momentum because you played your starters and you still got beat by a team that's been on the bottom half of the league all year long. And now Mike Williams is going to be out for the next 2 or 3 weeks with some back problems. Got re-aggravated in that game. So to me, Staley's got a lot to lose in this game. He may wind up getting fired even if they win it, but if they lose it, I think he's out the door, man. Even after a 10-win season, I just think there's too many head coaching hires out there that will be able to fill that void more a little bit better. He's just been widely criticized for a lot of his fourth down decisions that cost him last year in that Raiders game in the season finale. So I haven't really had a lot of respect for him as a head coach. I've just seen him screw up in a lot of spots. So I just expect the Jaguars to really handle business here and get it done. I'm not mad at you sprinkling some on the money line right here.
And Cody, it's one of the answers to my trivia questions is who was the head coach to win a Super Bowl with the lowest rated quarterback in the quarterback-driven era since 2004. And, of course, that is the one and only Jaguars head coach, Peterson, who managed to beat Tom Brady and Bill Belichick with the likes of Nick Foles.
Nick Foles, man. Nick Foles.
So now he's got Trevor Lawrence, who might be a little bit more talented than old Foles, though he does have some error proclivities that showed up sporadically and showed up again against Titans that just didn't ultimately cost him the game. Any thoughts on both prop ends and game angles for this?
First off, on props, yeah, I'm real interested in seeing what the completion total for Trevor Lawrence is going to be. Anything over the 22, 23, right there, that medium, I'm going over. I really like it. I really want to see where Christian Kirk ends up as far as yards. Where they're going to put him and Etienne as well. I think all 3 of those players are looking at offensively for the Jaguars, finding out what they're going to be and seeing what kind of bets we can put on them for sure. I'm all over Jacksonville here. I love them. I think Mike Williams is huge being out. I think that allows that weaker Jacksonville defense to kind of key in on some of those offensive players and kind of limit their how much they're able to do in the game. Both of these teams had decent offenses, with Jacksonville really kind of sneaking into the top 10 yards per game wise. There at the end of the year, they went on that big run, and a lot of those fumbles, if I'm not mistaken, are from early on. Trevor Lawrence, who just wasn't getting it done, and then turned it around late in the season when they went on the 6 out of 7 game run there at the end of the season. But I'm all over Jacksonville. They've improved tremendously. One thing that worries me is Cam Akers has figured out how to turn around there at the end of the year, having 3 games in a row rushing, I think, over 100 yards all 3 of the last 3 games, but have severely under that almost most of the season. Terrible running for the first half of the season for sure, but was able to get it together that last half of the season. So that's something the Jacksonville Jaguars might want to pay attention to, is that run game that they've been able to put together late, which will open up things in the passing field for them. But otherwise, I'm securely locked into Jacksonville here. I feel so comfortable in this bet. And there's just a lot of reasons why, and the talent dispersity and coaching is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I lean Jaguars at home. I think a good tempting teaser bet is the Jags. You could tease them with Tampa, and you could get them both at +8.5. They're both home underdogs with either good coaches or good quarterbacks, or both at the helm. So I think that definitely is a lean. Now we go into Sunday. And the first game up is at 1:00 Eastern. Miami at Buffalo. It looks like Tua is going to be out, though I haven't heard final confirmation of that. Maybe you guys know.
Yeah, he's out. He's out. Skylar Thompson's going to go.
Skylar Thompson. So Buffalo favored by 13.5 in response to Skylar Thompson starting. The Bills, 3/4 of the tickets. The public is hammering the Buffalo Bills. Almost 95% of the money line is coming in on a minus 950 money line for the Bills, plus 600 or better for the Dolphins. Total at 43.5. Basically, they're predicting something like 28-15 kind of score, something in that neighborhood. They basically don't think it will be close or competitive, even though Miami beat him the first game, almost beat him in the second game. But in both of those games, Tua was the main quarterback. So the question is Tua's drop-off a 10-point drop-off? Because if you looked at it offensively, these teams are basically dead even on the season. Almost identical in yards, almost identical in plays, almost identical at 6.1 yards per play, number 2 and number 3 in the league, respectively. The Dolphins actually the more explosive passing game at 7.3 net yards per attempt to Buffalo 6.8. Comparable touchdown to interception ratios, comparable completion percentages, comparable dealing with pressure and sacks. So you aggregate that. The question is, does Tua's going from Tua to Skylar Thompson? Is that a 10? This should be a 3-point spread if Tua was playing. Is it really a 10-point drop off to Skylar Thompson? To be honest, and after watching Skylar play last week, my inclination would be to say, yes, it is. But I don't know. What do you think, Cricket?
I think Buffalo blows the doors off in this one. I hate that we're not going to see this matchup with Tua going. I mean, they're 8-4 this year in games that Tua started and finished, and only 1-4 in games that he didn't. And the only win they got is that one last week against the Jets. Against the Jets team is pretty much already checked out for the year. Nothing to play for and things like that. But for the season, I don't think people realize how bad this Miami defense has been because the offense has been so electrifying. But they've been, for the season, they're ranked 24th in points allowed per game and 24th in defensive efficiency. And in the month of December, they were ranked 29th in points allowed per game and 28th in defensive efficiency. Their only wins versus playoff teams came way back in weeks 2 and 3 against the Baltimore Ravens and against the Bills, respectively, back-to-back weeks there. But they've gone 0-5 against playoff teams since then and have looked pretty awful in those games. I just don't see any way that they can keep this game close. I don't think they're going to be able to score any points. A bad combination is when you have a not very solid, proven starting quarterback and a really bad defense. Usually you need one or the other to X the other one out, and they don't have either one right now. And you got a Bills team that's very motivated. You got the DeMar Hamlin stuff that's happened the last few weeks, and I just think that they're a team that this is not where the Bills slip up. And I think they win. I see this 35-14, 42-14, 38-14, something like that. I see the 3-touchdown plus victory for the Bills, and I don't think it's going to be close. It's not going to be a very good game to watch, and I think Buffalo walks away with this one easy.
Your thoughts, Cody, including any prop options that might be out there?
Normally, I'm kind of licking my chops here to find out if they're going to screw up and set the odds too low on touchdowns for Waddle or Hill here, but and their yards. But I don't see that happening here. Even if they did, I'm not so sure he can get it done. With the quarterback situation the way it is. So, on the flip side of what you said earlier, I think double-digit favorites are recently doing very well in the playoffs. In this situation. So, and that's going to favor the Bills. And I'm thinking that's the way the defense and offense way too powerful. And then you've got a bad defense mixed with no offense without Tua.
I would like to know how those double-digit favorites have done against teams that are coming in without a quarterback that played the majority of the snaps throughout the season.
I don't know how common that is or how often that's why the line is a double-digit line. What I can say is that when it's been a double-digit line in the last 10 years, that's been a major money maker. The favorites have cashed at a very high rate because of the kind of things you're talking about. It just is a mismatch typically. That what Vegas is saying, it's a mismatch, and it tends to be a blowout because it's the playoffs, because everybody's going for everything, and so that variability tends to shift into blowout range. More often than not. And this game does have those attributes to it. I think the line is probably about right. I think it should be probably right around 13, 14 points because of the massive drop-off to Skylar Thompson. I do think the Miami coach is a creative coach, so he maybe comes up with something. But as you note, Thompson looked awful last week against the Jets in a must-win game, and they barely eked it out on a last-second field goal. So that was not a problem. There was almost no offense at all from Skylar Thompson. Hard to see it coming up and in Buffalo at Buffalo. Everything about this game screams blowout. If Tua was starting, I would be betting on Miami because they'd probably be still 7-8 point underdogs. And I think they'd be a live dog because that was such an explosive offense. But with Skylar Thompson, it's hard to see this game having any. There's a reason why this is the early game on Sunday when they think people might still be sleeping on the West Coast. Now, up next on Sunday at 4:30 Eastern time, might make a few home fans nervous because it's not the earlier in the day that where he excels better, Mr. Kirk Cousins. The New York Football Giants travel to Minnesota. Minnesota is favored by just a field goal at home, -150 on the money line, total of 48. They're predicting something like a 26-23, 25-22, somewhere in that neighborhood score range. A little bit higher scoring than a lot of Giants games have been, a little bit lower scoring than a lot of Vikings games have been. Now, the Giants are another team that's missed a couple of playoffs, that's traveling on the road to a team that's been there more recently. And again, as noted, that has usually been a home team bet. Also, teams favored by 3 or less have been pretty good at home in the wild card round as well. I lean towards the Vikings in this situation because of the situational matchup and because of Cousins versus Danny Dimes there. I'm not sold on the Giants. I haven't been sold on them all year. They've overachieved. Now, maybe they'll keep overachieving. They've done it in the past. But usually when a team with a weak quarterback limps into the playoffs like these Giants do, I tend to short them, and that tends to be a profitable short. So I lean Vikings. You could also tease the Vikings and get them up to +3 on a 6-point teaser, a 6.5-point teaser. You get them 3 and a hook. And so you could tease them with somebody like the Jacksonville Jaguars or with the Baltimore Ravens or with Tampa Bay if you like some of those other picks. I lean Minnesota in this game and lean maybe a little bit towards the under because that's how a lot of Giants games have been. What do you think, Cricket?
Man, this is a really intriguing matchup. This is two teams that have been kind of a pleasant surprise this year. Two teams that we didn't expect to have big seasons, really didn't expect them to be playing at this time of year. Right now, Kirk Cousins had a great season, one of his better seasons of his career, throwing for 4,547 yards and 29 touchdowns while completing 65.9% of his passes. But he's also thrown 14 interceptions, and his QBR of 49.8 ranked him 23rd in the league, just ahead of Ryan Tannehill and right behind Matthew Stafford. So that's not the best company you want to be in this year. And his average yards per attempt was very, very mediocre. I'm going 7.07 yards per attempt, about middle of the pack, 15th in the league. But when he targeted anybody but Justin Jefferson, it was only at 6.1 yards per attempt, which would have been second to last in the league ahead of only Kyler Murray, who did not have one of his best seasons, obviously. But I like the Vikings right here. I like what they've been doing. I like the home field advantage right here. 3 points, I'm probably going to buy the hook down. That way a field goal gets it for me. They did beat them 27-24 just a few weeks ago in that game. But I like what the Giants have done all year long, too. I think Brian Daboll deserves some really some consideration for Coach of the Year. I don't think he wins it, stuff like that. But what he did with this team, a team we expected to be around the bottom 5 of the league, he made a playoff with in his first season. He's done well. Saquon Barkley up for comeback player of the year, career high rushing yards, 1,312 yards. He also tied for the league leading receptions with 57 for 338 yards. So they've done some good things this year. Daniel Jones has played well. He's thrown 15 touchdowns, only 5 picks. So he's been efficient with the football. But they rank 8th in the league in rushing attempts per game and 25th in the league in passing attempts per game. So if they're going to have any chance in this game, they're going to have to find some offensive balance. They've been very well in the red zone on both sides of the ball. And I like I said, converted 63.3% of their trips to the red zone on offense, which is 7th in the league, while allowing TDs in the red zone just 49.2% of the time. So if they can still continue to do that. Now, however, that has not been that great lately on the defensive side of the ball. That's part of the reason that number has went up higher is because they have struggled in the red zone of late. So they're going to have to be able to when they get their backs against the wall on defense, they're going to be able to do something in the red area. But I think Kirk Cousins handles it right here, man. I don't know. I'm pulling for him. I want to see him have a big game. I'm going to buy the hook down to 2.5. But I think you're okay with anything the Vikings right here, anything under a field goal.
And what do you think, Cody, and any particular prop bets that might be of interest?
I'm looking at the rushing totals for sure. See what those end up being. Saquon Barkley turned it on this year, came back. If not for Geno Smith, would be a lock for comeback player of the year. But I don't see how he wins it coming over Geno Smith like that. But anyways, but I think that the Giants are extremely overvalued here. I love the Vikings here. I'm huge on this, and I loved your idea too of parlaying that there with a teaser with the home teams there between Jacksonville and Tampa Bay, and them teasing those home team dogs when Minnesota's a favorite, but by very little. They should be favored by 7 in my opinion, but getting them down to 6 and the Jags and Tampa Bay up to maybe +7. That looks real juicy, real good. And I think you'd probably come out somewhere around +160.
Yeah, in terms of some of the alternate lines and the way you can parlay those alternate lines, definitely some tempting bet here is because historically, if the total is 48 or less, and you think the teams are pretty comparable, those are really good teaser bet opportunities. If one of them is getting more than a field goal as a small home favorite, or is getting actually getting more than a touchdown as an underdog. So I think pretty much all the totals are 48 or less for the wild card round. And you have a lot of these teams that really look pretty comparable in many respects. Definitely the Chargers and the Jags, Giants and the Vikings, Cowboys and Tampa to a large extent. So definitely a lot of teaser opportunities, alternative line opportunities, some prop bets and single bet opportunities as well. I think if you like the Giants, probably a same game parlay between the Giants and the under. Probably the Giants win. It's probably going to be because their defense steps up, not because their offense gets explosive. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think if the Giants are going to have a chance, they're going to have to get Darius Slayton involved. When Daniel Jones has targeted Darius Slayton this year, his average yards per attempt is 10.2, which is about 5th in the league, right there around that. So top 5. And Darius Slayton's averaging 15.7 yards per catch this year, but he's only got 46 catches. So they got to get him more involved in the game, try to spread that defense out some, open some running lanes for Saquon, take some pressure off that run game. Because if you can't do anything in the deep passing game, opposing defenses have no reason not to stack the box and take that run game away from you. That's where they excel. And if they can't get that rolling, they're going to have a chance in this game.
Yeah. And a lot of teams have been trying to take away Justin Jefferson with, mixed success. If they're able to do that, then the Giants, as you note, may be able to contain the Vikings offense, given the disparities of Cousins splits between Jefferson and the others. If they're not able to, then it's probably a long night for the Giants. Up next, the last game on Sunday is going to be the Baltimore Ravens traveling to the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals, after starting the season 0-2, have rolled off victory after victory after victory as they look more like their Super Bowl making self of last season down the stretch of the year. Meanwhile, the Baltimore Ravens again are going to be without Lamar Jackson. And consequently, this spread has now spiked to the Bengals favored by 8.5. Since the Bengals rolled the Ravens last week with a backup quarterback, the public thinks the same thing is going to happen again. 3/4 of the tickets are on Bengals. Almost all of the money line tickets as almost -450 favorites is on the Bengals. The public leans a little bit on what is already a low under total of 40.5. And so they're basically predicting a 24-16 win by the Bengals. They don't think the Ravens can score much. They respect the Ravens defense, but to hold Bengals in check, but not to suffocate them entirely. Now, this is a game that if you tease it with 6 points, you could get the Ravens at 14.5, which might be a tempting bet, given that single-digit favorites have not been a great cover record, particularly of 6 or more in the wild card round, which is what the Bengals are. In addition, the Ravens are an exception to that coming off a loss team. Usually you bet against the team coming off a loss in the playoffs in the wild card round, but not if they're coming off back-to-back losses. When they're coming off back-to-back losses, they actually have a very high cover rate, and that's the Baltimore Ravens. And then you have the fact that in the wild card round, one of the best coaches in wild card history in terms of covering the spread is one John Harbaugh for the Baltimore Ravens. I believe he's 5-1 covering the spread on the road or elsewhere in the wild card round, especially on the road, is where he's been a money maker, often winning straight up, often in circumstances they didn't expect. So the question is, without Jackson, is will the Ravens just be knocked out like they were last week, or will we see some more Harbaugh magic with Tyler Huntley, who he kept on the bench last week to hide whatever they're going to do this week? And might they put a little bit of a scare into the Cincinnati Bengals? Cricket?
I think the key right here is going to be whether the Baltimore Ravens can get pressure on Joe Burrow or not. I mean, this defense has been nasty all year long. It's got even nastier when they made the trade for Roquan Smith before week 9. They ranked 9th in total defense, but they were 25th in the league in pass defense. So can they contain Joe Burrow, get some pressure on him, make him uncomfortable to where he does make some uncharacteristic mistakes and things like that? But since trading for Roquan Smith, I mean, the defense has allowed 14.67 points per game, second in the league, 288.8 yards per game, fourth in the league, and allowed 201.4 pass yards in the game per game, and that's 11th in the league. So they've done this defense is nasty, and they have the ability, and they're going to have to without Lamar Jackson out there playing. I mean, you're going to get Tyler Huntley or Anthony Brown, and neither one of them. I mean, this offense has averaged 12.5 points per game since Lamar went down 5 games ago. So they're just very, very pedestrian on the offensive side of the ball. But the defense has kept them in games and gave them a chance to win things. So I'm going to have to look to the total in this one. It's sitting at 40.5. It's gone down. It started at 43.5. It's gone down to 40.5. And I see this one being a 20-14, 21-14, 21-17, something like that. So anything under 40 right here, I'm okay with taking the under. And that's the way I'm going to lean. The Bengals defense has been very respectable all year long as well. They get a good pass rush, solid pass rush. And like I said, I just don't think the Ravens offense is going to be able to do enough right now. They haven't shown me anything in recent weeks. I think Tyler Huntley's on thrown for something like 471 yards in 4 games. Maybe he's got 4 touchdowns. It ain't 4 touchdowns, maybe 2, something like that. He's just not played well and hadn't showed me and the run game doesn't show me the ability to be able to take over a game either. So they're going to have to rely heavily on that defense. So I look for this one to be a closer game. I don't think that the Bengals covered. I really don't. But I think it's going to be a close, low-scored, hard-hitting game like this division always has. So I'm going to lead under right here and go under anything under 40 points right here.
I like the under there too. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I agree with you. I like the under there too, and that stems from something you didn't mention. They're third in NFL in points allowed, 315 points. So that's another huge indicator of the under there. They've done well there. But I like the Ravens here, and I might even put a little bit on the money line myself just because of that Harbaugh magic. John Harbaugh is incredible in these situations, and I look forward to see what he can do. I think the Bengals might bungle this up.
He's the better looking Harbaugh, right?
That's correct. He's the better looking Harbaugh. The polls out there, I've already asked all the ladies. John's the better looking Harbaugh. I'm definitely looking at the Ravens on the spread, and then you got. I mean, your idea again with the teasers, like those 4 together, be huge. You could get 14.5 plus 14.5 for the Ravens, plus 7.5 for the Jaguars, plus 7.5 for Tampa Bay, and plus 3.5 for the Minnesota Vikings. And you can come up with plus 270.
Right. Yeah, that'd be very. And what's interesting is we got some unusually big money line underdogs for the wild card round because the Seahawks are about 4-1, Miami is more than 6-1, and the Ravens are almost 4-1. And you don't tend to see a lot of those kind of big underdog lines in the wild card round in recent years. So these are definitely some above average numbers, and you can kind of see where they're coming from with San Francisco and Buffalo. Baltimore is clearly because of the absence of Lamar Jackson and belief in the Bengals. But for a division rivalry, that's a real big spread. And, definitely I like the alternative line there of the Ravens catching 14 in a hook. 15 is not that common. 16 is not even that common. That's basically 17 points. And in order to do that, if you assume the Ravens will score at least 10, that means the Bengals got to get to at least 27. And I just don't see the offense putting up that kind of number against their division rival and one of the top defenses in the league. And we'll go to the last game, which is a Monday night wild card game. They're doing a 3-night wild card weekend this year. The Dallas Cowboys, we see a rematch of a game I saw live in Dallas, except this time it's in Tampa. Dallas Cowboys travel to Tampa Bay for the final wild card game. Dallas is favored as a road favorite by 2.5 points, minus 140 favorites. Tampa catching 2.5 plus 120 on the money line, total of 45.5. So they're basically predicting something like a 24-22 or thereabouts Dallas to Tampa score. They're basically saying that Dallas will get their average point total this season, maybe a little bit less on the road against the Tampa defense, and Tampa won't do any better than their season average. Tampa is a team you look at from a yard per play perspective. Tampa's a team that is the weakest yard per play offense to make the playoffs, right next to the New York Football Giants. Giants are 5.2 yards per play. The Tampa was 5.1 yards per play, which, by the way, was the same as the widely criticized Denver Broncos offense. Net yards per attempt were similarly under 6 yards per net yards per attempt. Only team to make the playoffs with that weak of a offensive profile. The question is whether that was a reflection of injuries and coaching changes and things of that nature that will now click now that everybody's healthy for the most part, and Tom Brady is still Tom Brady in the postseason. The public leans with Tampa on the money line and the points, trusting Tom Brady to get it done. I probably lean in the same direction, with the one caveat being this has been a very explosive Cowboys offense down the stretch of the season, and a Tampa offense that just could not run the ball. And because they could not run the ball, could not set up play action all year long. And it put a real ceiling and a cap on their offensive capability. So it depends on how much confidence you have in Tom Brady to make playoff magic again at home against a Cowboys team that I don't think has won a road playoff game in forever.
Yeah, the last quarterback that the Cowboys beat on the road in the playoffs was Steve Young of the 49ers. They have lost 8 straight road playoff games, a streak dating back 30 years. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has been a minute since the Cowboys have won a playoff game on the road. They're 8-1 at home this year, but just 4-4 on the road, and have not looked great on the road. The defense has been pretty strong all year long. They got a league-leading 33 takeaways. They forced turnovers on 16.2% of opponent drives this year. So they've looked really well on the defensive side of the ball. The offense has played great too. When Dak's been healthy, when Cooper Rush was in there, I mean, they were even solid. He did enough to get the job done. But when Dak's been in there, if he can keep from turning the ball over, he's throwing a ridiculous amount of interceptions. But if he can keep turning the ball over, the offense has looked really good, and they are leading the league. They've converted 71.4% of their trips to the red zone, which is going to be huge in the playoffs. You got to be able to score when you get down in that red area to be able to be successful in the NFL playoffs. So that will come in huge into play, I believe, in this game. But the Buccaneers, it's just Tom Brady, man. I can't go against Tom Brady in these spots. But I'll tell you what the Tampa Bay does have to do. They cannot shoot themselves in the foot. They can't continue to have – they had 29 drop passes this season, which was second worst in the league. And they continuously had big penalties in the red zone to where they would have to play behind the sticks, get back, have a good drive going, and they on first down they get a false start or a holding penalty or somewhere. They're playing behind the sticks and just shoot themselves in the foot. They want to have to settle for a field goal or something like that, and they're not going to be able to do that in these playoffs. They're going to be able to score with some of these teams that have been pretty prolific on offense all year long. I think they're going to have to get Mike Evans involved. In Tom Brady's first 2 seasons in Tampa, he had 26 touchdowns and 5 interceptions when targeting Mike Evans. And this season, when targeting Evans, he only has 6 TDs and 7 picks. Now, Mike Evans did have a huge game in that Week 17 game against Carolina when they locked up the NFC South. He had like 10 catches, 207 yards, 3 touchdowns or something. But that was his first touchdown since Week 4. So they got to get him more involved. The insufficient line plays made Tom Brady have to get the ball out quick, relying on checkdowns to running back, short completions to Chris Godwin, things of that nature. But if they can get him any protection at all and be able to take some of those shots downfield to Mike Evans, try to open up that run game some, I think they'll be a lot more successful. And like I said, I just can't bet against Tom Brady in the playoffs. I'm not going to do it until he's done. And so I'm going to take Tampa Bay right here, plus 2.5. I'm going to buy it up to a field goal. So if they do, Dallas does win it by a field goal, at least saves me there. But I like Tampa Bay right here, and it's another one. Not mad at sprinkling some on the money line.
Go ahead. Tom Brady has definitely been magic in the postseason more often than not. The only quarterbacks he has a losing record against in the postseason are named Manning. And everybody else he's got a successful record against. Now, one thing is Tampa's going to need to figure out. So I kept thinking they were going to figure out a way to run the ball. They finished the season 3.4 yards per attempt, one of the worst rushing offenses in the modern history of the NFL.
Garbage.
It has been awful. So what do you think will happen, and what are some of the prop bet options to look for in this game?
Definitely some of those unders. I think towards the end of the season that started to level out a little bit. He came back from Thanksgiving looking a little thick, and that extra weight kind of carried him through for some extra yards there. But I'm looking at Mike Evans here in this. This is going to be the Tom Brady, Mike Evans show. I think what they did a few weeks ago against Carolina was that they were kind of setting up, hey, we got to get this. If we're going to be in the playoffs for very long, we've got to get this back on track and underway. And I think they did an excellent job of doing that. And I think they're going to continue that this week. So I'm looking at touchdown overs and anytime touchdowns for Mike Evans. I'm looking at total yards and total receptions by Mike Evans because I think he's going to have a huge game. I think he's going to have a huge game. Now, the only other thing I need to say about this game at all is I'm Tampa Bay all the way because the Dallas Cowboys have never beaten Tom Brady ever.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I think my
ever.
We can finish up with my our free bet of the week. My free bet will be a 2-team teaser. of the Minnesota Vikings if you can get it at 6.5. So you could get Minnesota at plus 3.5 and Jacksonville at plus 9. Then that would just could be my free bet. Would be that 2-team teaser bet of the Jags and the Vikings getting those extra points. What about you, Cricket?
My pick of the week is probably going to be the Bills. I think the Bills are anything under 2 touchdowns. I wouldn't mess with it if it gets too high. I don't think it's going to have enough time to get higher than that. I think it's about as high as it's going to get. So anything under 2 touchdowns, I think you're okay. Like I said, I see this being a 35-14, 38-14 type victory for the Bills if the Dolphins can even score 14 points. I don't know that they haven't shown me the ability to do so with Skylar Thompson at the helm. So, but that's my pick of the week is the Bills. Anything under 2 touchdowns right here.
I'm generally a more conservative gambler than this, but I'm going to go the 4-pick teaser parlay that we just talked about a minute ago. I put it in, I look at it, and I haven't stopped thinking about it since I was looking at that plus 270, I think it was, and that was Minnesota plus 3.5, Tampa Bay plus 7.5, Jacksonville plus 7.5, and
Baltimore plus
14.5. Plus 14.5.
I like it. Plus 270. Okay.
There you go. So some fun action for those of you who want a little action on everything, but want some big payoffs. You can take that, or you can just take the straight lines, or you can take some prop bets, or you can take some team total overs. A lot of betting options this week. We'll be putting up our official plays at sportspicks.locals.com. We also have Cricket's going to be doing write-ups on both the AFC and the NFC about questions that need to be answered in this playoff round for teams to have success. And there'll be other people putting up their own free picks and throughout the weekend as well. And we'll have an open live chat going throughout. Again, that's at sportspicks.locals.com. And remember here at Sports Wars to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, everybody. And hopefully it will be a wild card weekend.
Happy gambling.
Good luck.